on to the AP Seminar course, How to Succeed in AP Seminar. This is in the enrichment subworld of Schoolhouse. I'm hosting an introduction to AP Seminar course in order to help students achieve a 5 on the AP Seminar exam. So, what is AP Seminar? Well, it's part of AP Capstone, which is a 2-year program. First year, you take AP Seminar, and the second year, you take AP Research. According to College Board, AP Capstone is a College Board program that equips students with the independent research, collaborative teamwork, and communication skills that are increasingly valued by colleges. AP Capstone comprises 2 AP courses, AP Seminar and AP Research, and is designed to complement and enhance the discipline-specific study in other AP courses. In order to earn the AP Seminar and Research certificate, you must earn a score of 3 or higher in the AP Seminar exam. Next, you must earn a score of 3 or higher in the AP Research exam. In order to get an AP Capstone diploma, in addition to these 2 requirements, you need to get 3 or higher in 4 other AP exams throughout your high school journey from 9th grade through 12th grade. The AP Capstone Diploma program can help you develop key skills you'll use in college and career. You will become a self-confident, independent thinker and problem solver. You'll get to study topics you're passionate about in depth. You can earn academic awards recognized by colleges worldwide. You can stand out in the college admission process. And you can earn college credit. But most importantly, you will become a better human being who's able to understand different kinds of lenses and perspectives and stakeholders. I'll discuss these terms more. The AP Seminar course breakdown includes Performance Tax 1, Performance Tax 2, and an end-of-year AP Seminar exam. For Performance Tax 1, you'll be doing an individual research report and team multimedia presentation. For Performance Tax 2, you're going to be doing an individual written argument and individual multimedia presentation. And everything will be revolving around the QUEST framework. So what does QUEST stand for? The QUEST framework is as follows. Q stands for question and explore. U stands for understand and analyze. E stands for evaluate multiple perspectives. S stands for synthesize ideas. T stands for team, transform, and transmit. When understanding and analyzing the argument, as well as evaluating multiple perspectives, you'll have to dive deeper into at least 2 to 3 different lenses. So, what is the distinction between lenses and perspectives? Well, lens is the tool that helps us organize our thinking. A lens is an approach to a theme. It contains many perspectives. Lenses include ethical, environmental, scientific, cultural and social, artistic and philosophical, historical and political, futuristic, economic, etc. While perspective is our thoughts about a topic. Stakeholders are individuals, groups, or organizations that have a vested interest in or are affected by the research topic. When reading an article, you want to make sure it is credible. Look out for any logical fallacies. Is the author reliable? Does he or she have expertise in this topic? Is he or she misrepresenting an opponent's argument? You can also determine credibility and reliability by looking at the source. Peer-reviewed academic journals are the most credible. So Tier 1 is peer-reviewed academic journals and books. Tier 2 is specialized publications and government sources. Tier 3 is newspapers and reputable organizations. Tier 4 is popular magazines and popular media. And Tier 5 is Wikipedia, social media, blogs, and general sites. In your individual research report and individual written argument, you'd want to make sure that you incorporate a variety of sources, but with great emphasis on Tier 1 and Tier 2 sources. How do we develop a research question? You want to probe your topic with how and why questions. You want to determine the so what of your topic. What makes your topic relevant to today's society? You want to identify the points of debate, articulate specific details of the problem, and allow for revision based on individual research. I cannot stress the importance of the last bullet point for developing a research question. You do not want to force certain results to come up on the internet or databases that you'll be using for research. Rather, you will have to modify your research question along the way, and that's absolutely okay. An effective research question involves genuine points of ongoing debate. It invites engagement with alternative perspectives. An effective research question requires a judgment or evaluation to be made, and it should be researchable, not too broad, not too narrow, but feasible. An effective research question should be simple. It avoids additional embedded questions. By simple, it doesn't mean yes or no. It means your question should be a singular question, not two, not three questions, just one question, because you want to make sure you thoroughly research that question. Especially for performance tax 1, make sure your team isn't untrustworthy. For instance, don't choose your friends if you know they're more likely to fool around. Productive and responsible friends are more trusted. Still, it's preferred that your team comprises students with similar interests as you. This will ensure you're focused on the research. So, a student in my class asked, "What happens if a team member doesn't do anything?" I said, "Definitely inform the teacher. Remember, every student will have several checkpoints throughout the school year because this is required by College Board. The teacher will make sure everyone is completing their tasks, which may include annotated bibliographies to track the different sources. Anyone who doesn't follow tasks will face consequences." Remember, in AP seminar, you're being treated as adults. You're being treated as independent critical thinkers and problem solvers. Please do not use AI for your research and presentations. There's limitations with AI usage here. You may use AI for refining your question and citations, such as in citation generators in the bibliography. That's about it. Using AI for content is going to prevent you from taking any other College Board exams in the future, including APs and the SAT. This would remain on your academic record, which looks terrible when doing college applications. Alright? Now let's jump into the individual research report, rubric breakdown. Row 1 is understand and analyze context. 6 points. The report situates the student's investigation of the complexities of a problem or issue in research that draws upon a wide variety of appropriate sources. It makes clear the significance to a larger context. Typical responses that earn 6 points clearly state an area of investigation that is narrow enough to address the complexity of the problem or issue. For example, water pollution in India. This includes research that draws on some academic and scholarly sources and provides specific and relevant details to convey why the problem or issue matters or why is this issue important to better understand. Row 2. Understand and analyze argument. 6 points. The report demonstrates an understanding of the reasoning and validity of the source's arguments. This can be evidenced by direct explanation or through purposeful use of the reasoning and conclusions. Typical responses that earn 6 points. Provide commentary that engages with and demonstrates understanding of the author's reasoning, successfully using the source's reasoning to draw conclusions. Row 3. Evaluate sources and evidence. 6 points. The report demonstrates evaluation of credibility of the sources and selection of relevant evidence from the sources. Both can be evidenced by direct explanation or through purposeful use. Typical responses that earn 6 points go beyond mere description in the attribution, making purposeful use of the sources. You want to make sure you have thorough synthesis of different kinds of perspectives. Row 4. Understand and analyze perspective. 6 points. The report discusses a range of perspectives and draws explicit, direct, and relevant connections among those perspectives. Typical responses that earn 6 points go beyond mere identification of multiple perspectives by using details from different sources' arguments to explain specific relationships or connections among perspectives. For example, placing them in dialogue. You want the different sources to appear as if they're having a conversation with one another and building upon one another's ideas. Row 5. Apply conventions. 3 points. The report attributes and accurately cites the sources used. The bibliography accurately references sources using a consistent style. Typical responses that earn 3 points contain few flaws. Provide consistent evidence of linking internal citations to bibliographic references. Include consistent and clear attributive phrasing and or in-text parenthetical citations. Note, the response cannot score 3 points if key components of citations such as author, organization, title, publication, date are consistently missing. So what kind of citation should you use? Well, there's MLA, APA, and Chicago. Use the citation accordingly based on what kind of research you're doing. So if you're doing something more in the humanities, use MLA. If it's something more historical or political, use Chicago. If it's more scientific, use APA. But whatever citation style you use it all throughout. So if you decide on using MLA, use MLA for all citations. If you decide APA, do APA for everything. If you decide Chicago, do Chicago for everything. So keep consistency. Do not lose the easy 3 points. Row 6. Apply conventions. 3 points. The report communicates clearly to the reader, although may not be free of errors in grammar and style. The written style is consistently appropriate for an academic audience. Typical responses that earn 3 points contain few flaws, demonstrate word choice sufficient to communicate complex ideas, and use clear prose. Let's actually see a real life individual research report from 2017 that earned full points. The title of this individual research report was Deinstitutionalization, Leaving Patients Behind, with a word count of 1306. Yes, so for the individual research report, your maximum word count will be 1200 words, which is not a lot. But you do have a 10% maximum cushion, so the true maximum is 1320 words. Anything beyond 1320 words will not be scored by College Board. Okay, so let's just break down this entire paper. Let's read the introduction. News of the deinstitutionalization movement has passed by, unnoticed, since its commencement in the 1960s. However, growing concerns over poverty, prison overcrowding, and civil rights of mentally disabled patients call for recognition and deep understanding of deinstitutionalization as a major contributor to these problems. According to them, a professor at University of Southern California School of Medicine, Los Angeles and Backrack, veteran author of 41 articles on the topic of deinstitutionalization, deinstitutionalization is defined as the replacement of state or federal-run psychiatric hospitals with community-based alternatives. The government implemented this policy of deinstitutionalization because of the belief that mental hospitals were cruel and inhumane. Hope. that new medications opposed to ineffective treatment from the institutions offered a cure and a desire to save money. Overall, the government expected deinstitutionalization to improve the lives of mentally ill. Since the commencement, the program strived to develop independence among patients by increasing employment and interaction with others. Unfortunately, these positive outcomes occur only where mental community services are well established and maintained. In actuality, a majority of the released patients experience unintentional negative consequences of deinstitutionalization, such as homelessness, incarceration, and isolation due to the absence of the promised community care. This is the introduction, and it is very strong, right? We see the in-text citations, we see the context, we see the definition. The author introduces a problem, which is deinstitutionalization as a major contributor to these problems. The author mentions the source and shows credibility. According to Lamb, a professor at University of Southern California School of Medicine, Los Angeles and backpack, veteran author of 41 articles on the topic of deinstitutionalization. In fact, this important term, deinstitutionalization, is defined clearly, and the author shows a nuanced understanding, such as the well intentioned reason for deinstitutionalization versus the reality of the struggling patients. These strengths explain why the student earned a score of 6 for row 1, understand and analyze context. Let's look at row 2, understand and analyze argument. Patient homelessness. The absence and lack in quality of community-based mental programs contributes to the failure of the deinstitutionalization movement to improve the lives of mental patients. The major obstacle facing the success of deinstitutionalization is limited funding for mental centers, which results in an unprofessional staff and ineffective services. Lori and Frederick, co-directors of the National Alliance for the Mentally Ill Long-Term Care Network, provide examples of the effects caused by limited funding through the complaints of families who have directly experienced the unsuccessful community centers. Many describe the lack of 24-hour supervision when needed. They also delineate their experience with the revolving door syndrome, the frequent transportation of patients caused by the lack of adequate housing. One woman explains how her schizophrenic son had been moved in the system 62 times. Thus, her son remained ill for 20 years due to lack of treatment. Revolving door syndrome causes patients instability and leads to forced homelessness because of the brief treatment duration and forced discharge from government institutions. Marianos, president of the World Association for Psychological Rehabilitation and professor of general and social psychiatry at the University of Athens, delineates the direct correlation between the economic level of a country and availability of mental health programs. Only 51.7% of the impoverished countries had available services, while 97.4% of the wealthy countries had available services. Thus, his study supports the concept that community services assist countries in escaping poverty by housing and treating the mental patients who make up a third to a half of all homeless adults. The failure of the deinstitutionalization movement caused by insufficient funding of community mental centers results in increased patient homelessness after they experience the revolving door and realize they have no place to stay. That's really powerful right there. So, some strengths. This student synthesizes different factors relating to deinstitutionalization. So government, mental programs, there's different stakeholders clearly explained and analyzed. There is consistency present in citing sources. The student provides both scientific, for example, statistical, and anecdotal sources to strengthen the perspective. The student makes connections between different fields, for example, economy, global implications, and healthcare. So one of my students told me that this student who wrote this IRR could have improved the writing by specifying who's many when the student wrote right here. Many described the lack of 24 hour supervision when needed. Still, for row 2, the student who wrote this IRR received a score of 6. Let's look at row 3. Evaluate sources and evidence. Increased crime rate and prison overflow. Patient homelessness caused by deinstitutionalization leads to increased crime rates among the mental patients. Often they resort to crime in order to purposefully go to jail, where they can be fed and housed. In fact, in a survey conducted by Smith in 2012, an editor of the Sociology Composite Journal, it was found that around 40% of severely mentally ill people have been arrested at least once in their lives. Additionally, patients' untreated mental illnesses can also influence them to commit severe crimes. For example, up to 50% of mass homicides have been associated with people suffering from serious mental illnesses. Providing more evidence of increased crime, Wallace, Mullen, and Burgess conducted a study where they examined the frequency of offenses among schizophrenic patients over a 25-year period during the deinstitutionalization experience. They discovered that the patient's rate of offending rose from 7.4% in 1975 to 11.9% in 1995. Therefore, deinstitutionalization set an impetus for the increased crime rate of mental patients. As a result of the increased crime rate, the institutionalization also contributes to the overcrowding of prisons. For example, more than 1.8 million people with SMI or severe mental illnesses are booked into jails every year. Gloria and Frederick add that there happen to be more mental patients in jail than patients receiving proper treatment. In the prevention of prison overflow and crime, deinstitutionalization should be stopped or carried out a different way. So, key strengths here. I believe that credible evidence was used, so Smith Treatment Advocacy Center, as well as scientific studies. There is some analysis of evidence. For example, therefore, the institutionalization set an impetus for the increased crime rate of mental patients. As a result of the increased crime rate, deinstitutionalization also contributes to the overcrowding of prisons. Now, my student felt that there's a little bit of more description than of the evidence and more analysis should be added. Well, part of analysis is also having purposeful use of evidence and having the commentary. So yes, having the purposeful use of evidence from different sources and being able to synthesize them, make those deep connections, helps to formulate commentary, and that is part of analysis. So that's why this student who wrote the IRR still received a score of 6 points for evaluate sources and evidence. Let's look at row 4. Understand and analyze perspective. Isolation and suicide. Patients who avoid homelessness or imprisonment often experience isolation from society, which could eventually lead to suicide. Successful recovery and functioning of mental patients depend on the material assistance and emotional support provided by the community, as stated by Backpack in her book Deinstitutionalization, an analytical review and sociological perspective published by the National Institute of National Health. However, when mental patients are forced into community settings, they often experience isolation from others. Bachrach explains how there seems to be a consensus that society has difficulty in dealing with the presence of mental patients in their midst. Although the book was published in the 1970s, Bachrach provides an accurate reaction of the community to the mental patients since the repercussions of the deinstitutionalization movement became prominent around this time period. Additionally, Clearer, McNally, and Tripani support Bachrach's claim by suggesting that the community at large is frequently afraid of people with mental illness, believing them to be dangerous. This belief often causes rejection of the patients through victimization and harassment. Bachrach continues to give examples of the methods many use to isolate the patients, such as city ordinances, zoning codes, and unnecessary police arrest. In a majority of the cases, isolation serves as an impetus for suicide. In fact, up to 50% of those with schizophrenia or bipolar disorder attempt suicide, and 1 in 10 are successful in completing suicide. Suffering from societal rejection and abandonment, mental patients resort to suicide to solve their afflictions. As a solution, Richard and Edelman propose that we must not, however, spend a lot of time in talking, writing, and holding conferences and seminars on deinstitutionalization. We must concentrate our efforts in the direction of becoming more active in improving and participating in community mental services. Richard and Edelman, journalists for the National Association of Social Workers, call for the action to improve the community services in order to prevent the suffering of mental patients because this journal emphasizes the importance of social work in all different types of dire situations. There's good usage of commentary in the beginning to act as a hook for the reader. We have a compelling topic sentence. The student makes instant connection with credible sources, elaborates on an idea previously mentioned in the introduction, why community settings are insufficient for mental patients. The student uses a source from the time period when deinstitutionalization became first implemented by the government. Evidence is used to back up claims made by experts. For example, many used to isolate the patients, such as city ordinances, zoning codes, and unnecessary police arrest. There is communication between different experts, Clear, McNally, Tripani, plus Backrack, which helps to synthesize ideas better, which is why the student earned 6 points for understand and analyze perspective. One of my students asked me, um, what is the farthest we can go in terms of the year of our sources? Well, it's best to use contemporary sources for data collection, other types of information, peer-reviewed journals that are most up to date, so like more at least 2016 and up to now are much more contemporary and reliable. However, that doesn't mean you cannot use a source from the 1900s. This source, Backtrack from 1976, helps to explain that the reaction of the community to mental patients is still the same. There's a continuity of societal responses to the mental well-being of patients. So you can absolutely use sources from 1900s, for example, the 1970s, because if it helps you show a comparison from the past to now or a continuity, these kind of relationships expressed in your writing helps you to synthesize ideas better and have an even more stronger argument. All right, so do not be so worried about the year of the publication of the source, but make sure you have purposeful use of whatever sources you do implement. Make sure it's purposeful, clearly. Let's look at rows 5 and 6, apply conventions for the conclusion. Despite the positive intentions of the deinstitutionalization programs, the commencement has been followed by a majority of unintentional negative consequences. To prevent ostracization of patients, wider understanding of mental illnesses should be implemented through educational programs for a higher chance of the social acceptance of the mentally disabled patients. As a solution to the increased crime rates of mentally ill people and prison overpopulation, Smith offers the plan of diverting some of the funds used by the criminal justice system to handle the mentally ill people to the community mental services. With a majority of the crime and inmate sources diverted towards community centers for treatment, the criminal justice system would not need the full funds to manage its tax. However, this plan must be executed gradually as immediate transportation of the money would result in a collapse of the criminal justice system. Thus, the responsibility is now in the hands of those who are aware of this crisis to find a solution for these patients to live with the greatest degree of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So there's minor grammatical spelling errors that do not hinder the reader's comprehension of the essay. And look at the powerful end. This student decided to connect this issue with the component of the Declaration of Independence, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And having this kind of powerful punch or end will guarantee you an amazing score in addition to the key strengths found in this writing. So yes, that is it for today's video. I went over AP seminar in general and dived deeper into the individual research report. Next, I'll be talking about the team multimedia presentation for another video. I hope you enjoyed learning a lot about lenses and perspectives and the application of the IRR rubric in real time. Thank you and have a wonderful day.